Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Project Management Paradise podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Murphy, and today I'm joined by Declan Ryan, the CEO of the Project Foundry, to discuss the topic of leadership in uncertain times. With 20 years experience in the technology and managed service sector as a senior leader across change, project and program management, Declan has previously worked with some of the leading IT outsourcing service providers, managing large-scale, complex programs globally, before co-founding, the Project Foundry. Declan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I'm delighted to be here and really looking forward to discussing with you today.
Fantastic. Just to kick things off, can you tell us about yourself and your background?
I'll try to give you the short version. So my background came from a technology background. I started off working in relatively junior roles around document management, print solutions, in a local provider here in Ireland. I grew into a number of larger project type roles where essentially I got the graph of project management, having been a techie on a number of projects that didn't go too well and felt I could do it better. And thankfully at the time, my boss, I went to him with what I felt was a fairly compelling story to give me a shot, and in fairness to him, he did. And I then went on to manage everything from managed services, outsourcing, IT, large scale IT infrastructure, and into a little bit of software development type projects. So the type of stuff many of your listeners would be very familiar with, and no doubt are much better than I was at it. I then went and done some travels with Julie, my other half, and we ended up working in Australia for a while, where I helped manage closing down and handing back a banking license for the global bank in APAC. And that was a real eye-opener for me from a project management, a real watershed moment where I didn't necessarily have the crutch of subject matter expertise to call upon. I really needed to sharpen my core project management skills. I was working into the board of APAC. It was a hundreds of millions of Australian dollars at stake. Large scale program, and it was a fantastic learning experience. When myself and Julie came back from our travels, that really stood me in good stead when I went to work with another IT service provider where I met co-founder David Laird, and it was 2015 then when I founded the Project Foundry proper. That's really when where the story now kind of begins to kick off.
That's fantastic. And what professional services does the Project Foundry focus on, and how can they improve the lives of your clients?
So we've got a range of professional services very much focused on helping business and technology leaders deliver large-scale transformational programs of work. And the core skill sets that enable us to do that are very much project program management, as the name would suggest. Transformation and change, which is probably the newest capability we've grown within the business and we've invested heavily in off the back of client demand. Digital enablement, which covers a combination of cloud and traditional IT consulting skill sets, and a number of other supporting capabilities around the likes of PPM technology, and so on and so forth. So essentially it's bringing the core capabilities business and technology leaders need to have and may not have internally to help them on that cliched but very, very common digital transformation journey.
Perfect. And as you know, we do live in uncertain times. Can you elaborate how some of these global issues can be affecting the business world and the public sector's services?
So I think there's a range of factors that are affecting sectors, and it's not necessarily the same impact on a sector by sector basis. So we tend to focus on four core sectors, which is public sector, financial services, pharmaceutical and life sciences, and public sector. And each of those are experiencing their own challenges. I think the common trait that we see across all of them from a business and technology leader perspective is it's never been as a complex environment in which they need to operate. You know, they've got a number of high priority competing initiatives that they need to deliver. So whether it's eliminating technology debt, whether it's pent up demand off the back of the pandemic to digitally transform and be more digitally native, the use of the ongoing and ever growing use of emerging tech, and then particularly within the private sector, the likes of inflationary pressures, etc., having an impact on the business, which will ultimately then have an impact on how those business and technology leaders need to transform their business and how they're going to cut their cloth and find some way they can deliver sustainable change and clear outcomes for their business.
Absolutely. It seems like ESG is becoming quite an important factor now. A lot of companies with these global issues. How can we help business leaders with their strategy?
We've taken a long, hard look in the mirror over the last 18 months. And the conclusion we've come to, not that it took much thought on this one, was that we're not a strategy business. And nor do we want to be, and nor will we ever be. The strategies and the type of clients we work with have specialist strategy providers. Where we see ourselves being able to deliver the most value and the most impact is around executing on that strategy, turning that strategy into ultimately outcomes. The majority of those strategies are going to have transformational elements, and be it digital business, the traditional business transformation. And that's where we're very well placed to help clients actually execute on it. There's a fantastic amount of research out there around stats for the successful execution or completion of strategies. And if you look at some of the numbers and some of the stats of the number of strategies that actually deliver, it's absolutely frightening. And that's where we really kind of come into play, is to help bridge that gap between strategy and execution. And ultimately, the strategy realization is a big piece for us, bringing those skill sets and those capabilities that I've spoken about in a coherent approach and giving the clients what they need when they need it, with, say, a relatively small tailored teams relative to the size of the transformation, as opposed to a small army of people coming in and not really delivering any outcomes.
Absolutely. And from your experience, have you been surprised with the way that companies have managed their strategies? And have you seen like a reoccurring theme of fears that might be popping up? And where are they often getting this wrong? Is it from following a structure that may have worked for other companies but isn't best suited for themselves? Or is it just from the start they're just on the wrong footing? Yeah,
so I think there's a number of great questions in that overarching question there. So let me try and take each of those one by one. So any common themes that we see? So I think traditionally there's been an awful lot of time, effort and money spent creating business and technology strategies. I do see the static strategy sitting on the shelf gathering dust is beginning to diminish. Strategies are becoming more and more dynamic in relative terms. You're looking at, defining that North Star from a strategy and a transformation perspective, and your planning horizon is tending to look 12, maximum 24 months out. So that's a big change, is that I think that the time of the 5 or the 10-year strategy is certainly beginning to diminish. It's not gone, but it's certainly becoming less frequent. And that cliche phrase, more agile, more dynamic strategies that are regularly revisited are beginning to come to fruition. And so that's one big theme that we take. I think the other question you asked there, any kind of key challenges or where people tend to be getting it wrong. So the approach we take is that, and we don't go in and call somebody's baby ugly when it comes to their strategy. They've invested a huge amount of time. Their business strategy is their business strategy, and their business will live and die by it, or the successful execution on it. It's the readiness step that we've identified as being one of the key oversights. So that step where, and I'm really oversimplifying this, but where the strategy is spit out, and there's been a huge amount of money, as we've said, spent on it, and there's a feel-good factor. People have clarity, they know where they're going, or they believe they know where they're going, and it can jump straight into execution rather than taking a pause, looking at the various programs of work, transformational initiatives that are going to need to be brought together in sequence, with the right priority, with the right resourcing, with the right investment, to begin to bring them through to fruition. Also, bringing people on that journey from a change management perspective is absolutely critical. And I think change management is very much in the ascendancy, given the level of change that is ongoing in the majority of organizations, it's become absolutely critical to the success of strategic execution. People are dealing with a huge volume of change. There's certainly an awful lot of change fatigue out there. So I think the other thing people need to be cognizant of is that change fatigue, and having a sustainable strategy and change roadmap. Too much change at once is either not going to get the outcomes people want, or potentially going to break the business. That sounds dramatic, but we have seen it. So yeah, sustainable change, strategic readiness, and more dynamic strategies are probably the three big ticket items that we're seeing, and we're trying to help people on those items.
That's fantastic. And it's good to have the strategy in place, rather than, I like to think of the analogy of being a firefighter to a farmer. Firefighter just runs into the problems and fights them head on, whereas a farmer is planning in advance. So he knows what's coming and knows how to tackle these challenges as they rise. And where does the leadership in a company reside? Is it with the CEO or the leadership team? And can this be a source of conflict?
It can certainly be a source of conflict. To answer your question with a typical Irish response is, it depends. So we use a phrase internally, meet people where they stand. And I think people need to be very cognizant before they embark on their strategy execution or their transformational journey as to the leadership qualities and capabilities that they've got internally. And that's very much part of that readiness step that I spoke about earlier. And depending on where the leadership resides, ultimately, I suppose below or outside, I should say, the CEO and the leadership team, they're ultimately going to need change champions and leadership from within each of their business units. And we do see technology leaders, and particularly the CIO role, in the ascendancy. They're being tasked and they're being asked, and more is being asked of them. And again, a huge amount of those strategic executions and transformational pieces of work have technology very much at the heart of it. So definitely it's not just on the leadership team or the CEO to provide leadership. It has to be outside that, and it has to be at the transformational level, the programmatic level, all the way into the teams that are ultimately going to be affected by it. And very much focusing on customer centric, the customer at the heart of that digital transformation journey. And so certainly, I think leadership is becoming more and more of it's becoming less centralized and more diversified, and I think that's a good thing.
Fantastic. And what is the key to effective communication when it comes to a successful company strategy?
It has to start with a clearly defined North Star, and a compelling one. And I think if you've got a compelling, clearly defined North Star, you're in with a chance of successfully executing on your strategy. It's still not a given, but that's where it starts. Without that, best change management practitioners, best change management plans, best communication strategies, etc. If people can't really see what they're doing on a day-to-day basis from a transformational perspective, and see what their role looks like in the future aligned to that North Star, it's probably going to prove very difficult to win those hearts and minds, to get that change adoption, to change those ways of working, to transform the business, create the space for innovation, and all the brilliant, sexy stuff that everybody wants to get involved in. It starts with a really simple, concise, well-defined North Star.
That's fantastic. Declan, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this podcast. It was great to get an insight into how companies need to, as you said, define their North Star, how they focus on it, and how they can implement it across. And from your experience, what's the key to effectively executing a company's business strategy?
So I think in that readiness step that we spoke about, taking a structured approach and identifying and aligning the key capabilities you've currently got in the business where you're starting from with the capabilities you're going to need along that transformational journey to your endpoint. So again, back to that clear North Star, bringing that clear North Star into the readiness step, having a clearly defined approach, and having a very honest look in the mirror as to what the capabilities you've currently got in the business, what you need to either build, buy, or partner on, and then ultimately getting the business, the change champions and the people within the business ready and motivated for the change to come. Again, if you've got those three parts, three constituent parts, you're in with a chance of successfully transforming your business aligned to the strategy over your chosen period of time.
Fantastic. And how can you help a company's leadership team with their goals? Is it by clearly defining a path to success? Is it breaking it down into smaller steps? Or from your experience, how would you approach this?
Is that, look, the most transformational programs of work tend to be multi-year, and they go on, and they can go on for two, perhaps even 3 years for some of the larger ones. I think it's really important to have way markers. It's back to that strategy and the planning horizon. So it's very important to try and dovetail in your programmatic approach to transformation in with how regularly and how often we're looking at the strategy, and is the strategy slightly pivoting, or whatever that dynamic may look like. So it's important to kind of get a handle on that. I think those kind of key way markers, where we've got successes to celebrate along the way, absolutely critical. So we're a big fan of transformational sprints. So being able to show wins along the way on a multi-year program of work, absolutely critical. That's going to help with the motivation. It's going to help with reducing, I won't say it's going to eliminate, that change fatigue that we spoke about. And again, if you can win those hearts and minds, if you can get people motivated and enthused about transformation, you're little by little increasing those chances of successfully executing on it. Below that, you need the ability to get stuff done. You need the ability, core capabilities, project, program, transformation, change, technology, and probably more emerging tech and processes, one that's always overlooked. There's some of the key capabilities you're going to need at the coalface to then successfully execute. So again, back to, you can have fantastic plans, brilliant program plans, great deckware. You need people who can actually get stuff done, people who can find a way to get stuff done. And that's a dark art in itself.
That's fantastic, Declan. I really enjoyed this episode of the podcast. And just to wrap things up, if anyone would like to get in contact with you, whether it's to get some insight or to even have a further discussion with this, where would be the best place to reach you or the Project Foundry?
Feel free to reach out directly to me, Aaron. I love to have these conversations. We love to try and help people. So you can get me Declan at the Project Foundry or via the website.
That's fantastic. Declan, thank you so much for your time today.
Aaron, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for hearing me out.